I've got to thank Andria Tupola from coming in on a day off. It is as you know, it's a state holiday, and that means the State House of Representatives is studying things. That's what I think they do on a day off. But Andria is here, and it's here because we are at sort of an interesting point. We're about a week away from another crossover. And so, first of all, good morning.
Good morning.
Nice to see you. Thank you for coming in because I told you I had to work today, so you better come in. Right?
Happy Kuhio Day, everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Explain, a lot of people don't understand that there's two crossovers. One is that the House and the Senate work on their bills, which they did, and then they send them the other way. Mm-hmm. Then everybody goes to work some more, but everybody's got to know who's on first and who's on second, so it has to cross over again. Mm-hmm. And then what happens?
Then we hit conference committee, so then we determine what version of the bill is going to be ultimately passed.
Or is the whole thing going to go away?
Sometimes, yeah. If there's no agreement on the House and Senate side, there's chance that it dies in conference.
Isn't it though pretty for sure that most of the bills that survive the second crossover, something's going to happen on them?
I would say maybe 80%.
Yeah, that's
you
a lot.
still have your small margin of bills that the House and the Senate disagree so much that they'd rather kill it than work on it. So
now, one of the ones that we talked about at length the other day, and I know it's very, very emotional and very, very controversial, the so-called assisted suicide bill. Mm. And from what I understand now, it has been it's going sideways, but it's not dead, is it?
No, it got deferred in the Health Committee.
Yeah.
What's going on is that the proponents of the bill are trying to sidestep the process and see if they can bring it down to the floor for a full vote, even though in the committee, it was deferred. Deferred means that it basically died. Yeah. It means that enough people were going to vote no. So, I mean, there's all kind of sneaky ways you can do it, but I think one of the things that I heard my colleague comment was that, former Governor Abercrombie is one of the ones that's trying to sidestep the
and by the way, I want to make sure people understand that. Those that read that yesterday, I believe, or whatever in the press, former Governor Abercrombie is in favor of this. But I'm not sure that the reason was explained enough.
Well, and if he's in favor of it, that's one. But two is that, as the governor, he knows what the processes are, which means that it goes through a committee, it gets referred, and then from that committee, if it doesn't pass out, it doesn't get a full vote. Isn't
it sort of interesting, Andrea, that this has received attention across party lines and to a lot. And I can tell you that you and I did a little piece on it, and then a couple of days later, I had Rep. Oshiro in.
Good.
And Rep. Oshiro brought in a doctor, and the doctor was in end of care, practice. He was care, elder care thing and
palliative care.
Yeah, and very, very concerned. Not that we have to, as a society, have to look at this thing a little bit more seriously, but making it so readily available caused some concern. So it's the language almost as much as the concept.
Right. And I think we tried to make that apparent in the hearing between Rep. Oshiro, Rep. Har, and myself is that this is not a Republican or Democrat issue. Yeah. This is a societal concern that if we pass this, is it good policy? Yeah. Is it good public policy? And, there's so many things that were questionable in the bill. One of them stated that instead of writing the cause of death, that the doctor should list the terminal illness.
Yeah, yeah.
And I called
that made, when that flag went up here on the air, it literally blew up on social media. We had so much response to it because you can't say that if somebody had Parkinson's or whatever, that killed them. Because if it was a pill that they took to hurry their departure, it wasn't the disease that killed them, it was the pill that killed them.
Well, and I asked the Attorney General that question because the Attorney General wanted us to add in the definition of fraud. Mm-hmm. So I asked the Attorney General's representative, so why would you guys want to add in the definition of fraud? She said, per the federal law, it's important that we define this within this statute. So I said, is it true that if the cause of death is listed as terminal illness instead of the actual cause of death, is it fraud? And she said, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why, I don't care how you dress it up. If it is, right?
Well, the other one said that the doctor would consult the person who wanted to participate in medical aid in dying to, one, have a witness, and two, do it in a private place. Yeah. But there was no mandate. So I asked the Attorney General, the way that this reads, is it possible somebody could do this on their own with no witness? She said yes.
Yeah.
Is it possible?
It's kind of scary, isn't it?
Right. Is it possible they could do it in a public place? And she said, yeah. It's not mandated that they do it in a private place. Yeah. I mean, can you imagine if someone wanted to die watching the sunset?
I was going to say, what happens if somebody goes down to the beach and takes off their little pill and crosses their feet and goes to sleep on the beach?
Yeah,
You know?
and especially with the witness part, because if there is no witness to what happens, then really, is this just a law that allows manslaughter with no prosecution?
Okay, no, but the bottom line is, as a society, we have changed and altered our thinking in a lot of areas.
Yes.
So it is not beyond conception that something's going to come out of this down the road, and that there may be a way to peel away many objections. That someday, if not this time, in the next couple of times, because this has been, I can remember this welling up, ever since Kevorkian started doing his thing. So are we as a society getting blasé about life?
Probably. I mean, I think the thing that really pulled questions in our mind is that it was modeled after Oregon legislation. So that the head or whoever the director is for Oregon, she was there in the hearing. So we questioned her because we asked, has there ever been any adverse incidents or, malpractice? She said not one incident of malpractice. And then we found out that every year Oregon destroys their records. And so, so we asked them,
what do you mean destroys their records?
They said for privacy, after a year of medical aid and dying, they destroy records. And so the question was, if you destroy your records, how then do you know that there's never been an incident, a malpractice? So it's scary that we would base legislation off another state that still has a lot of loopholes they're working through.
What's your best guess, though, that that there are some very organized, well thought out people and groups that are in favor of this, and they understand that maybe the language at this time around isn't enough to pass, but they're going to go back and work on it. They're not; these folks aren't going to give up, are they? And then you have to say there's an interesting comment off the air that says, please ask Rep. Tupola if she thinks that some of this is based on the financial concerns that families have on how long somebody's going to be alive and how much it's going to cost to keep them alive.
Oh, yeah.
That's the concern, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that when everything comes down to money, it's sad that we would put it as a cheaper option than providing palliative care. And we are one of the states with a higher level of kupuna and end-of-life options.
Isn't this because we local people are a lot more family-oriented, I think, than other states, even though I'm not sure about that, but it sure seems that way. I mean, I know there are other places that have sort of a Hanai deal, but we have it's commonplace, right? A relative will get together and say, Susie, you're having trouble with your little boy, Auntie will take him. And, you're still mama, but Auntie's going to bring him up. That's common here.
Well, and that's what people were bringing up in the hearing, that, for the Hawaii culture, it's not part of our culture to do that. It's a part of our culture to take care of our elderly, to care for the young, that every phase of life is valued.
However, we have to face facts that our elderly are a lot more elderly than they used to be. In other words, before I remember back in old Hawaii, somebody in their late 50s or 60s, they were elder. And now in their 80s and 90s, that's 30 years more of it, if you have an illness, of it costing the society and your family a lot of money.
Well, and
that's what I'm worried about.
I would say that, but I would also say in Oregon, one of the concerns was that people were told that per their health care, that they were the better option for them was medical aid in dying instead of helping them. And so I would hate for it ever to come to that, that, you know what, you're so old, it's just cheaper to do this. And you know what, we're going to deny you any palliative end-of-life care options.
Yeah, and that's very scary. And what I must tell you that there's an interesting parallel, because I do a monthly show with my friend Dr. Russ Masunaga, myhawaiidentist.com. And he talks about dentistry insurance when you're young is fantastic. I mean, they love you getting your teeth cleaned, and they love you and later on, when you're all bust up and old, it costs a fortune to get new teeth.
Right.
And somebody's saying there's a shift. And that's the sort of thing that should be looked at here. And we ought to make darn sure that we are putting aside something, whether it's insurance or something, for end-of-life care, because it's going to happen to a lot more people.
Right. And I would say that it should never be a conversation about, well, we got to save money. The quality of life is more important.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so as far as you know, this thing is sort of simmering, but it's not gone. There's still things that can revive this.
There's possible things that could revive. So until the session is actually over and finished, because they revived, I think it was the marijuana dispensary the day before the last day of
the day
session.
Before it died, right.
So, I mean, I guess you never know, but we'll see. I'm definitely hoping, because in that hearing, it was a true act of democracy. I mean, everybody got a fair chance. Every single person on the committee asked some really tough questions, even people who are for it. So a lot of the committee members said, you know what, I was going to walk into this hearing, vote yes, but after this discussion we've had, I don't feel good.
I must give credit to people that realize that, okay, I'm for this concept, but not this language.
Yes.
In other words, it leaves too much to interpretation. It doesn't. It should be slamming some doors, and it doesn't.
Right, and I want to thank Dr. Ray Seitz. She was one of the palliative care doctors that came forward because she said, I am for medical aid in dying, but Hawaii is not ready for this. And she's palliative care. She said, people ask me to help them end their life all the time. But she said, let me tell you why we're not ready. And she went through all the steps of how, there'd have to be a mass amount of education towards palliative care doctors before you implement anything like this.
Okay, we got plenty more chance for you to jump in and join us. There's a couple of other things. Rep Tupola was in Hilo. We're going to talk about what happened at the county convention, but also we got to talk about a few other things, and that's the dreaded, quote, rail bill. And that thing has been slowly chugging down the tracks, excuse the expression, and we got to keep a big eye open on this one.
Bacon.
I like bacon, but bacon doesn't like me.
Bacon.
I don't think bacon likes anybody. Actually, one thing I've never said, Andria Tupola is is the minority person of interest to us right now, and is in great shape. And what do you attribute that to? You're tall, you're slender, you're in great shape. What's your regimen? What's your routine?
Well, I definitely love running. It's the most therapeutic exercise.
I knew I didn't like you. Somebody loves you. No, I'm kidding. It's a run.
Well, yeah. When in 2010 I did this big health kit because I was 260 pounds. I had my second child. That was huge. So I started changing my eating patterns. The one thing we never want to do, change your eating patterns.
Yeah, I know. I've been there and done that. And so you were a big girl.
Oh, yeah.
Now you're just a tall girl.
I'm half Samoan.
Yeah.
Food is my favorite thing. And, everything goes to your thighs and your hips. And so I had to make a choice because I knew that for my kids, for my future, getting healthy was going to be the right choice. But
my wife did something when I was going through my massive weight loss. She put something on the refrigerator that I remember to this day, and it says, "Nothing tastes as good as being healthy feels."
Yes.
Isn't that cool?
Yes.
Because I used to chew down that stuff. We just played the bacon song. I used to think, more bacon, please. And now I'll have a bite. I love it.
I used to watch Biggest Loser eating Zippies. I was like, I love this. They're losing weight, and I'm just pounding the Zip pack.
Anyway, do you find that doing what you do, your choice is running, that you get to think?
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty good, huh?
Yeah, I love running.
You run by yourself?
Most of the time.
Yeah.
I like back roads, like clear space. I hate running on Farrington Highway where you think you're going to die. But...
Okay, let's run you along the rail route. There's this big bill. I want to move into this thing. A lot of people don't understand this, and I've talked to a lot of people at the state level that really don't really get it, that how umbilical the state is to the rail project. Because should things fail, and they don't look like they're in really good shape right now financially for this project, should things fail, the purse string holder is the state. So talk to us about what is the rail bill that hasn't been even heard yet.
Well, so it's been heard on the Senate, and it got changed multiple times. Then it came to the House, and the transportation chair changed it. So now it's going to the Finance Committee, which I sit on, and I have no doubt she'll change it again. So the current version of it allows for outer island projects.
Right.
So if you
to have a surcharge.
Right. So if DOT cut back on all capacity projects, which means that new projects have all been put on the back burner. So for a lot of outer islanders, they think that this bill is a little bit better so that they can get their projects going on the outer islands.
Yeah.
But there were still people standing up when we debated it on the floor that this is still very regressive to have it be part of the GE tax. And that if we do allow this to happen and, say, for example, like people charged in the outer islands, is the project actually going to get done?
I was interested in how much of that came up in Hilo, because I do know that the purpose of the gathering is to, redefine the party and the direction and all of this kind of stuff. But I'm sure that a lot of our island, here's the danger. Somebody thinks that if you make the tax permanent, and you also allow the counties to do their taxes, pretty soon the tax as we know it is no longer called a 4% tax. It's kind of like a 5% tax. It's kind of like a 4.5% high tax, which means that that's the new base. Now, anytime future legislation wants to, they can come along and say, well, that worked for the rail, so how about we put a little bite on here and a little bite on there, because this thing is getting out of control. This tax is very high.
Right. And I would say for legislators, it's always the same conversation. Either people, one, question the project and whether we should still be dumping money into it, or two, we already started it, we got to finish it.
Yeah, and the harsh reality is, when you shrug your shoulders and say, well, it's too late to change now. I know people in the community, and I'm sure you hear from them and your constituents say, it's never too late to change.
I've heard a lot of people say that.
Yeah.
And I think April 20th is the deadline that supposedly the federal government is supposed to get back to
Yeah,
them.
that's coming in like a matter of days, folks.
And
this is the end of March.
Yeah, and whether or not they get that. So, I mean, there's all these different pieces moving around, but I would say that what people really want to see is the city come up with a better plan.
Yeah. On that subject, we have right now, I know a lot of cooperation between the city and the state with regards to homelessness. And that I'm curious, are the neighbor island people shocked? Those that haven't been here for a while, then they come over to Oahu and they really see. I know they have their own enclaves and their own homeless problems, but it pales in comparison to our problem here on Oahu.
Oh, a lot of people have told me when they come in, even people from out of state, they say, "Oh, we came back to Hawaii and we were kind of shocked to see all the homeless under the bridges, under the freeways, everywhere." And I mean, honestly, it's one of the things you can't miss.
Here's one that says, please ask Andria. We're talking about it earlier this morning, and maybe this cost of living thing is pretty real when it comes time to looking at how many of us shop online. What does Rep. Tupola think, and what do you think the House thinks and the Senate thinks on this taxing Amazon bill? Is it going to happen? I like that because I'm a shopper. And I hate to say this, but I grew up in the retail business, but I do shop online, and I know in certain things that we buy that we reordered online because it just doesn't make any sense not to. Where are we going with this? We're looking at Sears, we're looking at Kmart, we're looking at a lot of these bricks and mortar places disappearing. Mom and pops are having a struggle. Are we going to be able to somehow get Amazon to collect the tax from purchases made online?
Well, from where the bill is right now, that bill is dead. But as far as online taxing, from what I've heard from other states, that it's slowly coming, meaning that even other states have started to tax. I know in New Jersey, Amazon has a plant within there, but they told me that they've been taxing online for a while now. Yeah. So, I mean, not that we need more taxes in Hawaii, and definitely it's helpful for us to buy online since a lot of these stores aren't here on the island. But just
some say that there are certain things on these stores, by the way, that try as you will, you're not going to be able to drive down the street and buy them on Oahu.
Right.
So some stuff you have to buy online.
You have to buy online, and that's where I think people think that it's unfair to have to, it's our way to get that. But it was the only caucus no we had this session.
Okay, real quickly before our 7:30 report, two things I want to think about a little bit. A lot of people here on my program and on others, but a lot on mine, pushback from the Building Institute, BIA of Hawaii, talking about this sprinkler bill, the mandatory sprinkler bill. That's one thing. Oh. And the other thing was, we'll talk about that a little bit, but the other thing was when things get at you, there's also another group, the Airbnb people that are advertising very heavily, where they're showing local people, very, very touching and emotional, that need this income. And I do know that there's a big school of thought down at the Big Square building about this, that maybe anybody that's doing something legally up front, they should pay taxes, and maybe the Airbnb people. But what about somebody that says, okay, well, I'll pay the taxes, but they're still doing something illegal? How do we draw the line here?
Well, and a lot of people say that because the county is the enforcer, that the county needs to step up and do this, because they are the ones that set the zoning for where it's legal. Right. So if they're not enforcing it, then what the legislators, well, some of them are saying is then it's our job to tax them. It's our job to go and tell them that, you owe us taxes. But other legislators are saying, but are we making these illegal rentals?
Are we legitimizing?
Are we legitimizing them?
Yeah. See, that's a big concern. We're going to come back and talk about that in a minute. And I'll tell you why. I do really get it. And I understand how these families are. And there's a lot of people saying, hey, you know what? If you don't have this kind of activity, all of those people that come and stay at them, they're not going to come to Hawaii anyway. There's a certain kind of traveler that wants to travel that way. They want to go break bread in your house, and they want to save money. And
I know.
Yes,
exactly.
A dilemma. Okay.
Yeah.
7:30 is coming up. Rep. Andria Tupola is in the house. Oh, yeah, it's Minority Monday, and we're happy to have Andria Tupola in the house, even though it's a holiday. And by the way, speaking about holidays, sometimes you have to do stuff on holidays. And we were just talking before the news break a little earlier today, we were talking about the county meeting in Hilo. Tonight is the Oahu County meeting, right? And isn't this a time that ideas get discussed on what are we going to do going forward. And the biggest thing seems to be I don't want to say revive a party that's really taken a few hits, but let's talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
It is reviving a party that's taken a few hits.
Right. I think it's one thing to identify a party that's struggling, but it's another thing to push it under the water, which I felt like happened when one of our former members decided to resign. I know that things are tough, but there are still people in the fight. Mm-hmm. So if there are people still in the fight, it doesn't help to,
Yeah, on that subject, let me tell you, as you know, I've been doing for longer than anybody in Hawaii does these opportunities to have the ins on the air. Anybody that's elected, whether I agree ideologically with them or not, they're here. I do Tulsi Tuesday. I do Colleen Hanabusa. I do Andria Tupola. I do the city. I do the state. I do everybody. And that's because people need to know. But there's been a lot of pushback lately that there was a piece recently done on Beth Fukumoto, who has resigned to become a Democrat, that there's a lot of things that she voted for that was what her constituency expected that she's pushing back on now. How do you roll back a vote?
You can't.
Yeah.
You can't.
Yeah.
I mean, basically.
How do you blame a vote on somebody else?
Yeah. I mean, basically, when you go back and you say, oh, well, I thought this, but, I was wrong. I really thought that.
Yeah.
I mean, it really leads people to question, like, what you stand for and who you are. Because, if you change overnight, then obviously you're taking some career opportunity moves instead of actually having integrity and having values and saying, this is who I am and I don't change. But
here it fueled an interesting comment from a few of my listeners the other day. And I thought about this a lot. And I've had a lot of people talk to me off the air saying, I heard that guy call up and maybe it's coming to that. There are some that say, why should we have parties? Why don't we just have people that want to run and be elected? And I guess the immediate answer for that is because if a party has a united platform of sorts, and let's say that most Republicans or most Democrats, and this is a question, do you think that most of them, they may not agree with everything, but the things they agree mostly is that's the party that they're going to affiliate with?
Yes, I would agree. Yeah. You don't have
so
to.
Nobody says every single thing you guys like, I like.
No, and it's never going to happen that way.
Yeah.
You're never going to all the way agree with anybody in any group. So, yes, you look at the platform and you say, okay, how many of these things do I identify with, and do I agree more with this party or that party? And in Hawaii, you got to think about the fact that a lot of people push towards this, Republicans should be more moderate. But in Hawaii, it's easier to be a conservative Democrat than a moderate Republican.
Yeah,
so
that's
really,
very interesting. You better highlight that, folks, because what I agree with you 100%.
And I think that what the Democrats are begging the Republicans to do is stand for something, define what you stand for, and then keep your circle like that.
Okay, how do you address people who say, okay, I get that, but let's take a look at the city council or the county councils. Let's take a look at the mayor's job. These are jobs that are supposedly, quote, nonpartisan. Everybody kind of knows what party somebody's in, but that may or may not be the issue, right? You're supposed to vote for the person that you most want. And there's also a lot of people that resent the fact that the way that we do our electing in Hawaii is that you must register as one party or another in the primary, that you have to declare allegiance to somebody that you may be uncomfortable with. So maybe that's why a lot of people don't vote.
It could be. Yeah. It could be. And I know that a lot of people don't understand that part, because they go to the primary and they think, I got to vote all Democrat or all Republican. And then they go to the general and they think the same thing. So, yeah,
exactly right.
Getting to know the electoral process is super important. The voter registration as well as the voter processes. But, at the end of the day, I think if you go back to that discussion, if you want to change the actual structure of parties, that was decades ago when when that conversation happened. And will there ever be a chance for another party to rise up?
Yeah, that being said, and a lot of people say, well, the Democrats, that's a union party. And there's a lot of people that are union members that are Republicans.
Yeah.
I'm sure that they don't brag about it. But I hold this thing dear. Sometimes if you're in a union, you're in a group that is, aligned to a Democrat person, that they're doing that sometimes expeditiously for financial reasons. That, it's more acceptable to be a Democrat in Hawaii than it is to be a Republican for whatever the reason.
And if you want bills to get passed, if you want your collective bargaining to go well, then you side with the majority party. So, but I have heard unions endorsing Republicans. I have heard them say we actually look for good candidates and not party lines.
Well, that's why a union is more likely in a mayoral or a council race to back somebody because they can say, well, it's nothing to do with politics. This is the person that feels the pain of our members, and he's going to take care of us.
Yeah. I would say that to your point about the city council, it's tough because, you think that somebody thinks a certain way, so you're going to vote for them, but there is no true line, like, are they, true keep the country people, or are they developers?
Well, that's interesting because where you come from, out your neck of the woods, it is country. And so I would imagine that a lot of your constituents say, hey, you know what, Andria, when you get into town, they don't understand us. They don't know why we're different out here, why we don't want development. They don't understand these kind of things. Help us.
Well, in the county council, if you think about it, you look back on some of their mottos and what they stand for, it was to keep the country. Some of their, thinking was to make sure that the actual zoning for areas remain so that parts of the island still remain country.
And that's a good point you made earlier. Let's let people understand. When you look at things, what's happening with regards to taxes and what's permissible in a neighborhood, it must be difficult for the state to deal with some of these issues because the state doesn't have a role in zoning.
No, and that's county. At a lot of the meetings we talk about with traffic, they always say, well, what about overpopulation? Well, that's zoning. So it goes back to the city. Are they flipping ag land? Are they building houses in areas where previously it wasn't supposed to be that way?
Yeah.
Are they making sure infrastructure is up before they increase the amount of affordable housing?
Okay, somebody said, would you please ask Rep. Tupola what she thinks of the bypass road issue? We talked about that a little last time, and that there certainly is provisions for it, but there seems to be a lot of clouds on who has to give up what to make particularly the Lualualei or that other access available every day. Should it be every day or should it be just when it's needed?
I think as far as, because half of it is part of Schofield, it would have to be like maybe during peak traffic hours, not all day, because they have live fire training in parts of it.
Sure.
So,
That's spooky, by the way.
Well, and so
are you in a hurry? Don't get shot at.
A lot of people on the west side previously have driven on the road. They've had military access for whatever reason, and a lot of them have used it. So the tragedy that I always say is that we have all these roads in our community that are locked to us, that aren't, being repaired so that we can use them. And so my big push, obviously, with the Navy side of Kalaeloa is to turn it over to the Army, who will repair it and use it because they're active.
They're active there.
The Navy is withdrawing their forces. They're withdrawing their areas of influence. So
there's a lot of people that don't understand that, and I do know that by district, you all have to know of the military involvement. Now, the Navy, controls a lot of land there, but it's a lot of land that they're not currently using because they've either cut back in those areas or they've replaced it with some other locale besides Hawaii.
Right. So the Lualualei area used to have a fire station. It used to have housing. It used to have actually civilians.
A community.
Right, and it's not there anymore. So in the event that the Navy is not using the land, but yet it's not being repaired, and in the event of an emergency, we have no other route out of Waianae. It's so important for us to push to get this done. And, I've reached out to Representative Gabbard to help on this, and I'm going to continue to push that because as of right now, if they build another bypass road, they're gonna have to increase taxes and fees, hands down.
Sure, and there's only because there's no money in the bucket. Well, you have to create the money.
DOT is funded by federal dollars and taxes and fees.
Yeah.
So they said in our community meeting that if we build another road, we will have to raise taxes, and that's why they cut off all the capacity projects. So I mean, for me, it's a no-brainer. There's a road. Yep. It needs to be fixed.
Yeah, I mean, and by the way, there are some that agree that the real main time you should use the road is maybe not in peak hour every day, but just in emergencies. We kind of do that already, right? I mean, even though nobody wants to say in an emergency, you can't drive there. I know you're supposed to get there to get by, but you can't. Most of the time they figure out a way to, at least on a temporary basis, make it kind of work.
Well, and it's been working better now that I've been elected because a lot of those roads have gates, they have locks, they have keys. Yeah. So the whole getting the key, getting the officers out there, it's kind of ridiculous. And so the second part of the conversation was about access roads because our senator as well as our city councilwoman is proposing to build another access road, and people in Waianae don't want more roads that are locked.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. Somebody had this comparison the other day to me. There used to be a gate up at Hanauma Bay on top of the mountain, and it had I think about 30 padlocks, and they were all locked to each other. So that there were so many keys, so many people for different reasons had keys to the gate. It's the same thing out there, right? That there's, hey, don't worry, I got the key.
They're getting better at it, but a lot of times they'll show up, the key doesn't work.
Yeah.
And, the community gets so frustrated because they say, okay, so in the time of emergency, you guys lost the key, then what?
Yeah. You have to use the Hawaiian master key. It's called the bolt cutter.
No, that's
right?
what I'm
Boom.
saying. Well, and I think that with the access road they're talking about, the other part of it that's kind of controversial is that they will have to possibly relocate families on the homestead.
Yeah, and that's, that takes a lot of understanding, right?
Well, and I've never been for that, and I know they're going to relocate them, incentivize their move, but some of these families have been there for decades.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, telling them, give up your land so we can build a road that's going to be locked.
Yeah. Oh, jeez. Oh, and we mentioned very early in the piece, I don't think anybody realized the significance in the resignation of Rep. Beth Fukumoto, and it took a party that had a few people, and now it's even fewer people. I know that the county, these conventions are designed to reinstall enthusiasm and faith. Did you get a feeling in Hilo, and do you think that tonight people are going to know more about what do we not know about the resignation of Beth Fukumoto?
We didn't talk about that very much, but in Hilo, they were definitely excited. The Hilo County Chair is David Yonan, and he has a really good energy, good spirit about him as far as his desire to get more local people involved, to get better, candidates, qualified candidates out there. So his team of people, I think, have the right outlook as far as like trying to get the party in the right shape on that side.
You know what I think is interesting? Sometimes the party would recognize opportunity. In other words, they would notice an area that could really use, if they got a good candidate, it's doable. But there's sometimes people that just want to participate, and it's not as though the Republicans are trying to put a name on every ballot, because there's sometimes that if your name is on the ballot, unless you're really ready to know what a campaign is like and getting support it's pretty hard.
Oh, yeah. I think I've organized the districts into tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Yeah. Tier 1 meaning like an open seat, or maybe a person that has ethics violations, or a seat that used to be held by a Republican that's more viable. Yeah. But then there's tier 2 where it's like, okay, so you have a huge uphill battle. Yeah. You're going to have to raise like 90,000 to try to even make a difference. And so I think that, we should be realistic with ourselves.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's the reality. So I was asking you just before the break, and I want to follow back on this. For instance, we talked a little bit about the Airbnb guys, and that there's a very strong want of a better expression, lobby and advertising campaign. So, fix it so that we can have the Airbnb, the guys, the mainland guys, collect and pay the taxes, because that makes it easier on everybody that's doing it, right? But the danger is, you pointed out, maybe you can reiterate it, because I think this is an important issue, is that by collecting taxes from somebody, if they're not legally doing something where they are, does this all of a sudden legitimize them? Would they have a position saying, hey, wait a minute, you came to me and you collect my taxes. Okay, I pay my taxes. Why am I illegal?
Well, and I shared on the floor a comment from my previous colleague, Derek Hall, called me from Kauai, because when this came up, Kauai had gone through this way before us.
I should say, yeah.
And so what had happened was they said, okay, if people are going to be here, then, you guys get registered, pay your taxes, and then you're good to go. But then it just blew up where like this whole coastline got bought out. And, that's the other question is, are they buying out affordable housing? Yeah. Because a lot of representatives has brought up the fact that, okay, you're going to collect taxes from them, but they're still taking affordable housing away.
Yeah, but you know what's interesting is you could say that in the past it didn't affect it, because what we're really talking about is waterfront properties, that had this huge amount of appeal. You show the pictures online. Here's your beach house that you're going to be at. Okay. But
it used to be that.
Yeah, it used to be that. But now you take a look at some of these Airbnb ads and you see these people have a typical house in a typical neighborhood.
And they're nestled right between you and your neighbor.
Exactly. And, so obviously this is causing some concern at the neighborhood level, because if somebody is operating, under the Airbnb banner and they got an extra car, or they got, or they're, they're just not happy. So I'm sure you're hearing that even in all areas.
It was a huge part of the conversation, is that the more we have these in regular neighborhoods where they don't respect the fact that we all go to work, they don't respect the fact that partying all night is not what we do on a weekday, and they don't know any better because they're on vacation. Yeah. And so I think in order for us to really proceed forward with this, we got to do the right steps in the right order.
But there are some people that say, with regards to Airbnb, that's not the issue, because usually the owner is on property and there's some other things. But that when you have a big beachfront property, a vacation rental, and you are renting it to a family and they're all coming over with friends, they feel entitled to do these things because they're paying hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars a day. So they don't want to be told that they can't stay up late at night and have a pool party, because that's what they're doing.
Right. And that's
Yeah.
where it becomes a problem,
Yeah.
where it's not in an area where there's other vacation rentals, but where it's in a neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that being said, now let's circle about again and finish up a little bit with the 800-pound gorilla. I do know that there are some that are saying, okay, the rail surcharge is going to be an indefinite one. And I do know that this bill is sort of percolating behind the scenes at the moment. We haven't been talking about it lately. How many bills are there still around approximately that deal with either extending funding for the rail or helping the neighbor islands create their own funding?
There's only one bill floating right now.
Yeah.
And I think the ultimate decision is going to come up to the two finance chairs,
Yeah.
which both of them have already expressed their concern
Yeah.
and their disinterest in extending the tax.
They say sometimes, and you can explain this, well, it's an election year. Don't expect much to happen. But kind of everybody's looking at an election year every couple of years anyway. So is that true? Or
well, this year is not an election year.
That's right.
So if they did do something,
it would be now.
this year.
Which means it's highly unlikely that if in a year that it doesn't make that much difference, they're still opposed to it, because being opposed to a tax side is the right thing.
Right. I mean, I think also there's the fact that on April 20th, they're supposed to determine whether or not their federal funding is going to also be extended. So all these different factors play into it. I know that when we hear it on the Finance Committee, I have no doubt she's going to change it again.
I am worried about this. 3 or 4 people have asked this in different ways. Our congressional delegation, almost to the person, is 100% refuting and fighting everything that President Trump is trying to do. Hawaii was embarrassed with the hashtag, pass on Hawaii or whatever it was, boycott Hawaii and all this stuff. So how are we going to get from the federal government attention from somebody from a state that seems to be challenging everything the federal government and the president is trying to do?
Especially with the Attorney General's lawsuit.
Yeah.
I mean, that really made a statement as well.
Yeah.
And I would say that there's actually a position within the executive branch under the governor's office that's specifically supposed to be going and getting federal funding.
Yeah.
And when they came before the Finance Committee, that was one of the questions they asked them. They said, is your federal person bringing down federal funds, and how much and where? Because the person was more like a federal funds manager, where she's going around telling people, okay, well, you're supposed to do this, that. No, your job was to get us more federal funding.
Right.
And you have
everybody, hungry birds on the nest, right? Everybody's asking for federal funding.
Right.
So wouldn't they be saying, okay, well, which of these states asking for money is in lock with what our message is and what we're trying to do with this country?
Which state is trying to be a sanctuary state and is going to not qualify for federal funds either? So there's a resolution for that one.
Somebody called us up the other day and said, this whole thing about the no traveling. There are 39 Muslim countries that have no restrictions whatsoever coming to Hawaii or going anywhere else. And the few that do means that we're not against Muslims. We're against radical Islamics. Even here in the local Muslim community, are we being confused?
Well, and I think that the 6 countries that were referenced in the travel ban bill, these are ones that don't verify that.
Yeah.
Verify the credentials when people leave and come into the country.
Yeah, if they did that, it'd make our job a lot easier to say, okay, well, in that case, we're okay.
Well, and on top of it, this travel ban does not prohibit people from Hawaii leaving.
Yeah.
So if you have family that's out there and they can't come here, guess what? You can go there.
Yeah. And there's another thing, too, and we're taking a look at the tragedy that sometimes happen. We're just taking a look at, acts of terrorism, and this time in England, and how appropriate is it that we take a look at things and say, these guys, they're dealing with a big fat problem, and they're just, there's active terrorism. There's active terrorism in this country. We can't deny that.
Right. And I would say that one of the bills I had to cover when I was in Hale was, I think it's HB 898 or SB. It's basically a gun bill.
Mm-hmm.
We had all these gun bills come in last year, but
Right.
it's because people think that because of the terrorist attacks that we should be restraining guns.
Yeah.
Whereas other people think the opposite.
Yeah.
Is that if there's more
Yeah.
terrorists, then we should make sure that we preserve our constitutional right to bear arms.
But we are, I know we hear this all the time. We are so far removed in Hawaii from most of these troubled hotspots that we don't know what it's like to be afraid to go to a church. We don't know what it's like to be afraid to go to a nightclub or to go to a place where there are people that might be causing harm.
So true.
Yeah.
I lived in Venezuela for over a year, and I can say that living in a country like that where you never know when a riot's going to break out, everybody carries guns.
Yeah.
You never know when people are going to attack you. That feeling is unlike anything I've ever felt here.
I would imagine that. And, look at all of these people that were at the hip-hop nightclub. This had nothing to do with terrorism. It had to do with people with guns in a nightclub. All of a sudden, one guy gets in an argument with another, and then pretty soon 3 or 4 guys are shooting at each other in a crowded nightclub. So there are many that are saying, guns don't kill people, people kill people. But in that respect, in that nightclub, guns kill people, because a lot of people got hit by bullets that were not intended for them, right?
Right.
When a terrorist goes in, he's trying to take as many lives as he can.
Right. And I think that when we talk about gun rights law, I mean, we're talking about in the privacy of your own home, making sure that you have one for your own self-defense. Like, that's different, I think, than,
But what's interesting to that
public.
is, we because we're almost running out of time, but I can tell you what's interesting about that discussion, and I've had it many times. In Hawaii, if you shoot somebody in your own home, it's almost as though you're a shooter. It is difficult, right, to say that was a justified shooting. At what time? How threatened was your life before you shot that guy in your house? Yeah, scary, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we are going to run out of time. I want to thank you very much for being with us. And what's Andria Tupola's number one bill this week?
I think this week we are going to hear the rail bill. I mean, I think we are. Probably it's going to come up in here, and we only have a week and a half left to hear this bill.
Your constituents out there know that the rail is important. And when we come back next time, I have 3 calls about this. What about the state's feeling and Andria's feeling about the Waimanalo Gulch being extended pretty much indefinitely? There's some people that say they're not happy about that, right?
Right.
Hey, thanks, Andria. Have a nice week. We'll see you next time.
You too. Aloha.